Hello and welcome, one and welcome all, to the wonderful, the spectacular, the completely made up Game Guru Twitch broadcast. As per usual, I am your host Lee Bamba and I shall be talking about all things Game Guru. Now, there has been some offline calls for checking out the latest EBE because there has been progress on it and you might want to see that. Not as much progress as you might hope, so it probably would be either me repeating myself or it being a very, very short demonstration indeed. So before we delve into that, I always want to give the opportunity for the thread that we've set up specially for requests on what I should talk about during these broadcasts to be read. Otherwise, what's the point of actually having the post in the first place? So we should be able to get to the new ones. This was dated the 5th of July, which is 2 days ago. Scroll back a little bit, back to the 29th of June. Okay, so it looks like the new ones are the ones we can read up on. That's a feature request. Moving on to a grey. So we need some Twitch requests for today, otherwise Lee won't have anything to talk about. You know what? That is never true. I always have things to talk about. It just gets less and less relevant as the hours and days and weeks roll on. And eventually I do have to stop to get a cup of tea. Or anything to read, to be honest. It's pretty much where we left off last week. And if there isn't anything, it will be a delve back into EBE and maybe some conversations, and then reduce the broadcast to 30 minutes, which is always an option. I always reserve the possibility that if it was always snappy and we got all the content across and we hit 30 minutes, then I stop the broadcast at that point. But it very rarely happens. I usually end up talking, for about 10 minutes in the intro before we actually see anything. So Belios writes, I'd like to see something on calling custom animations from Lua, not just accessing the AI animations, but actually scripting direct access animations, play animation, loop animation. I think we have had broadcasts on that, but I could certainly touch on the subject today. I think we've covered it several times actually. So when you say not just accessing the AI animations, but accessing the AI animations is pretty much the same as accessing your own animations with your custom models. And I don't actually have a custom model with some custom animations that I could use as a demonstrator. I would still be using the AI animations to demonstrate the non-accessing of the AI animations for answering this particular broadcast request, because we'd still be using play animation and loop animation. And I'm not a 3D modeler or a animator, so I can't whip one up and then actually drop it into Game Guru. If I had those skills, it would be a great broadcast. Here's how to make a model, here's how to animate it, then here's how to import it into Game Guru and then play that animation. But I'm missing some key skills there, so maybe if someone wants that for a future broadcast, then attach a custom model with animation that you've exported as an X file, and then I'll use that as the subject for one of the broadcasts. I think that would be a good idea. He continues, especially how to chain call animations. For example, I want to have a character sitting down, then he get close, he stands up, walks a few paces and waves. All that is very, very possible. You do what's called a state machine inside the script. So you basically have a variable that controls a state, and the variable not only controls which animation, but whether the animation's been triggered, whether the animation's in progress, detects for the animation to be completed, and only when it's completed do you move the state to the next set where you'd initialize the next animation, and so on and so forth. It isn't just a case of state 1 is sit down and state 2 is walking around. There's a lot of intermediate stuff between those two states that you have to take care of. You have full control when you do scripting. So you have to take the responsibility of doing all the boring stuff that you just think comes for free. It doesn't. You actually have to think about it and code it one meticulously minute boring detail at a time. So yeah, send me a custom model with custom animation. I'll show you how to get someone sitting on a chair and then standing up and running around and then maybe doing a wave. Oh, there's the last bit there. I know you won't have all the animations. You don't need to do the exact sequence, just a few on how to script animation chains would be great. Okay, the animation chains thing that I was bleating on about, that's probably something that I haven't done in a broadcast, and I can show that quickly, so good suggestion. Board of the Rings, right, I would like to see, if possible, the ability to swap NPC weapons from, say, a sword to a bow, an arrow, and get the arrow projectile fire at the player. Yes. You see, in order to change from a sword to a bow and arrow, you're going to need bow and arrow animations. You're going to need a character that holds the bow and the arrow in the other hand and then performs that animation. We don't have an animation for that, so it's going to look a little bit odd. The character will sweep as if it's holding a sword, and then an arrow flies out, so that just look a little bit odd. So I'm not sure a lot of people would really appreciate what the point of that was. But yeah, if you're doing your own animations and you've got your own animation for the bow and arrow sort of thing, then yeah, what you're really asking, I think, is how do we get our own projectiles? Well, there's no custom projectiles right now. You have to sort of rename and edit existing ones. And I think I covered a little bit about that in terms of changing weapons and customizing weapons. Don't think I've talked about customizing projectiles, but because that's on the voting board to actually add your own custom projectiles, it's probably not a good Twitch broadcast to show you to hack one in when it's going to be actually provided properly, where you don't have to hack anything. You just basically go in and say, I want this, I want that, and it makes the projectile, and then you can select it within the gun or the bow and arrow, whatever it is that your projectile it emanates from. Another paragraph. I'd like to understand the CSI underscore calls better in lieu of the character control limb. Yeah, there are at least 2 broadcasts on that. I remember one that was using the zombie character, the big fat zombie, and he was walking around. You could control his animations, but if you still want that, I might be able to dig out the link after this Twitch, so I can throw that at you. But it does definitely cover the character control limbo, and its sort of respective files. So what is AI manual? These are not in global.lua. Is there any information on these and how to use? Again, some are obvious. But are there more AI commands that are built in that we don't know about that may not be present in the out-of-the-box scripts? Well, there are a lot of commands. The best place to find them, you may know this from previous broadcasts. If you go to global.lua and scroll to the bottom, this is where we deposit all the new commands that are added. So obviously the ones above, all these are Lua commands, but all these are the ones we add. Now these are what are called direct calls. They're actually quicker than these, which have to go through a messaging loop. These are actually acted on directly within the engine. So we add all the new commands here. So that's where you'll find all the really cool Lua things that you may not have found in scripts that you may have perused. I would like to add my support / wait to Bellius and Lord of the Rings requests post above. Okay, so there's 2 votes for each of those. So I think that's certainly, in my mind, this is still a vote for showing how to do a state engine to control multiple animations within a single script. James C. Right, I think we have had Twitches on most of the things you can do in GG. My problem comes when you reach a dead end. The feature is not in GG yet. I know there is a list of features, will not take long to do, but interrupt in the workflow of the new voted task. But if nothing is in the Twitch requests, could not Lee try to implement one of the tasks in the short-term jobs list, even if it takes 2 or 3 Twitches to complete? It might come as a little bit of a shock, but we don't develop features in hours. Features take days. Those are the quick ones. It takes weeks for the bigger ones, and for the monster ones it takes months. Development is a painstaking process. If I were to broadcast for 1 hour on any of the features on the voting board, you would be bored to tears. Could just spend 45 minutes watching me peruse source code and mumbling to myself. Doesn't make for great watching. If by short-time jobs you mean bug fixes, we did do a broadcast before on me spending a whole hour fixing a bug, and I didn't really get much. Wow, that was really brilliant, you should do it again. So I don't think it was that popular watching Lee fix a bug or adding a small thing. I suppose I could do a future broadcast on adding a new Lua command, but I wouldn't want to add one willy-nilly. I'd want a specific feature that is requested that is also identified as a really, really quick add, and then I could probably do that. I think the important thing here is not what Lee does in the Twitch, but the fact that there is contact, even if to only say ... Well, the last week was a great week, and we had done this, this, and this. I do miss that blog every day. If leaders accept this option, then the feature I would like to the list, added to the list, sorry, to be able to change between third person the wizard and first person, to pick up a sword or crossbow to fight, and then change back to the wizard. Yeah, toggling between first person and third person. Because a lot of the third person is set up in before the game starts, that would be extremely difficult to do within a Twitch broadcast, alas. As this happens when you press F9 to do level editing. Well, that's not sort of the most elegant way, because F9 does a lot of things to freeze the game. And you really are basically pausing. It will glitch if you sort of switch between third person and first person. If we use the F9 approach, the game would freeze for about a second before it carried on. And that's a big no-no in game development. You don't have bits of your game which freezes for 1 second, because it destroys that continuity. So the F9 system of doing it isn't the way. It would have to be a new piece of code which sets up first and third person before the game starts, and then it can migrate between them. Maybe just by doing the different camera calls and stuff. So that's really why that can't be done in a single broadcast. It might be able to do over 4 or 5, but who wants to waste 5 broadcasts on watching a single feature be added? Because it will take about a day or maybe 2 days to do something like that. And as it's not on the voting board, I probably get lynched, because it's like, well, why have you spent a whole week on that when there's things on the voting board that everyone agreed for me to work on, and I just ignored them. So, welcome to politics. Turkus 1971 writes, some good ideas for the Twitch above, but short help for those who don't have a super duper graphics card. How to optimize your frame rate. With Lua and the tab menus, I'm myself okay with this. Yeah, I could add that if someone reminds me in the Twitch. I'll just give you the 5 golden rules on if you're on a low system, how to get a fast game so you can carry on. Great stuff, Lee. Of course, look at the EBE shaping up. Yeah, I can show you a little glimpse at that. It looks like another vote for the 16-bit. So you want me to use up more memory, and you want your files to be bigger. So that's what you're voting for, but you're going to get much more flexibility in the future kind of shapes that you can hold within the EBE. So just to be clear, that's what you're voting for. Consuming more memory and larger file sizes. But don't worry, I've just exaggerated. It's a little bit more memory and it's a little bit more file size. So we're on the last page, and 2 posts on the last page. Another one from 1971. Also, can Lee clarify, if we create a building using the EBE, any other entities add inside around it, and within the building grid can be uniformly rotated, scaled, copied and pasted with the rubber band widget tool, and will the building and entities become one mesh with a low poly count? Answer: you will be able to attach entities to the building as child objects, but they will retain their individual entity identities, so you can run individual logic on them, like a door will open, a light will switch on, a lever will be able to pull, a window will smash, things like that. We've removed the ability to scale the building entity that was created by an EBE, because it will create a lot of horror stories, and it would just look wrong. If you make a building and then squash it down, the player won't be able to walk in it, and there'll be a lot of problems in and around that issue. So we've removed scale, but because of that, it would then mean that you can still rotate the building, so then all the entities that you've attached as child objects to the building would also rotate. So you don't actually have to kind of reposition constantly the furniture and the paintings and the doors and the windows and the switches and stuff that are inside that building. So hopefully that answers the question. And in terms of the building itself, yes, it's one mesh. Until it's a very, very large building, then it gets cut up. But it's pretty cool. It's one big texture atlas, and even though there's a bit of vertices floating about, it's all just one mesh. It's one draw call. Extremely efficient. And you'll be pleased, since my last broadcast, I have now added the bit which optimizes the mesh, so it removes, it's instead of individual cubes, it's large 3D boxes, which retains all the UV and texture and data. But the polygon count drops vastly, and the draw call is now 1. So it's extremely efficient, as well as the collision system. D. Vader finishes with, in response to the statement, so the SS Bloom problem might only affect AMD cards. I think you'll find that it's the power of the card helping there rather than the brand. The 970 is not exactly an average card, I get it with the NVIDIA, it's just a consequence of GPU power. My 660 nowhere near as fast. I generally have to disable SAO on Bloom to get decent frame rate. Yeah, there's that's one of the things I can show in sort of the golden 5 things to do if you want your machine to be fast. SAO is a post-process shader that's monster heavy. It needs a pretty decent card to get benefit out of that effect. Otherwise, you're just going to have a slow game. So that's one of the things you will switch off. You can switch SAO off and keep Bloom on, because there's still a Bloom shader. You just have to be aware, and we can do some speed tests on that. So of all the feature requests that have been done, the one that's really highlighted is you want to see how, if you're on a low-powered system, how to make it faster, just with some simple tricks. You want to be able to see how you can sequence together a series of animations using a state engine, and you want to see the latest version of the EBE, work in progress. Well, let's start with that one, just so you can sort of get to see what I've been messing about with over the last 7 days. I'll launch my dev version, which is currently 1.14-B1. Now, I remember I was in debug mode, and this afternoon I compiled it as release, but I never tested the release. So you're actually looking at an untested release version. Not release as in release to the public, just the debug is a lot slower than the release binary build, which I can use to run this thing at full speed. So we go to the builder, which you'll have recognised. I can't remember exactly what I demonstrated the last time, so I might do a little bit of overlap, but you probably notice things that I'm not announcing as new, because I've been using them quite a while. But before I get stuck into that, I just want to see if there's big screams for no, please don't talk about that on the live, because you're watching this in video land, you won't know this, but there's another screen I can see with lots of questions and statements and stuff, and it allows people to ask me questions whilst I'm talking, and even change my mind so I can demonstrate something completely different. So I'm just scrolling down past all the hellos and stuff. Someone's got a broken foot, so I hope you get well soon. It's not a nice thing. It takes a long time to get your foot back. Synchromesh is working on a tribute video, so always entertaining. Sound is very low. VIG 2015 says the sound is very low. If anyone else concurs, please let me know, unless you can just turn your speaker up. And there's a couple of comments, just internal talks. VIG, Lee, the same message from MK83. I had to create rectangle, circle shapes and sharp holes in the ground with a rectangle circle shapes tool, which you can resize. So these are more suggestions for the EBE. We used to have in FPS Creator Classic things like line, circle, rectangle, and they were very useful. You could paint huge swathes of the sort of canvas very, very quickly. I might do that, but they can be substituted just with a brush for a rectangle, a brush for a circle, and you can just pick the brush and just paint like that. And then maybe if there's a way to sort of scale the brush so it multiplies the cubes by 0.5 and 0.2, then you get all the features that you would have got in the old arts tools. The one I'm more interested in that takes priority for me is the ability to cut, copy and paste, so you can highlight things and then paste them other areas. So that's the one I'll be implementing before I would do any sort of arty tools. But I think arty tools is a good idea, and if the brushes don't quite deliver that power, then yeah, we're going to do a few little art tools. Baraka 1511 writes, hi Lee, I've been watching the vids on the EBE, looking forward to it. Question, my modelling package, I have a tool instantly smooths objects to round edges. Is there plans to do that? No, there's no plans to do that. That would turn a very highly optimized model into an extremely polygon intense model that only nice graphics card would be able to render. You could probably have some sort of facet control, so it rounds a cube into just one faceted edge, and then you turn the dial up and it's two faceted edges, so tessellating the amount of extra polygons you want to inflict on the world, but then get that sort of rounded thing. But what you find is it will round the things you want to round, but then also round the things you don't want it to round. So you end up with this sort of weird, it's not quite what I wanted, and then no one ends up using it. So that's really the purview of the 3D modeler. And as I've said on numerous occasions, I do not want to stray into this situation where I'm now having to write a 3D modeler. I want to keep the mission, how to create buildings easily and quickly. And to have a rounded corner, we could probably do that with additional shapes So in addition to cube and slopes, you might have round edges. So you'd pick that, and then you'd be able to paint the corners, the round corners, only in the places that you want them. So Tarkus, speaking of draw calls, when will tree and entity branching be implemented to help reduce draw calls? Tree batching and entity batching. Well, if you make stuff static, entities that are static, and group them together, and then light up the scene, all the meshes that use the same texture will be batched. That's entity batching in terms of static. In terms of dynamic entity batching, that's probably halfway down the voting board list in the graphic engine optimization and improvement stuff. That's probably when you'll see that sort of thing. Not sure what you mean by tree batching, but if you just mean trees in the distance, and you want to batch them all together because they're all using the same bark and leaves, that I think is also on the voting board, but it's like a tree generator, so you'd have infinite trees. That's probably when we'll do that, because tree batching isn't just about grouping stuff together and drawing it as one. You've got to have different polygon resolutions based on the level of detail. You might want some that animate, some that don't. You might want to use decals instead of models when you get into the extreme distance like Speed Tree does. So it's quite a big job to implement that. And remember, I'll be implementing it as some feature and then move on to the next feature. Whereas something like Speed Tree has a huge development team and license it to middleware, and it's a huge development. It's a monstrous product. And yet, I'll be adding it sort of on a whim because it gets to the top of the voting board. So it is a big job. It's a huge job, and it could easily spend a year just adding that. So we'll add a version of it just which answers the idea of I want to see a forest full of trees and I don't want my game to slow down. So we'll probably reach that point and answer that question. The questions keep coming in, so sorry about people who want to see me do something in Game Guru. All I've seen so far is a web page and a blank level in Game Guru. So I'll try and race through the last ones of these. How can I make a hole in the ground without water? You can't make a hole in the ground. It's a completely sealed terrain floor. What you have to do is create your own artificial terrain geometry in your modeler, cut your hole in that, and then have the player walk on the artificial ground. So then the terrain that we're seeing right now, so if I go to File, and Random Level, which generates sort of a randomy level, that would be sort of like the underground. That's the lowest of the low positions within your game, and then on top of that you basically stick some entities. Now I haven't got any entities that would describe sort of an artificial floor, but imagine I'd modelled something and it was this, like that, and I raised it up. Imagine I've actually created some undulating terrain, and then I can sort of place it down with a grid system and stuff. You effectively create a hole, you see, in your terrain, then you'd fall in, and then you're into a cave, and then you can get back out, and that sort of thing. So that's how you would do it. There isn't a way to cut a hole in terrain, because then you just fall infinitely into the negative void, which isn't really a great part of anyone's game. Belios, we 100% need at least a few different terrain shapes and texture brushes ASAP. We have a voting board that you can make suggestions at the bottom of the voting board. You can also add stuff to the community as in the forums nearly every day, and the ones that everyone concur with get added to this shortlist, and I can sneak a couple of the quicker things into my sort of release schedule. So even though I'm doing a voting board item, I can throw in lots of extra things just so everyone gets a little bit of what they want. I don't think it's the subject of a Twitch conversation, because I think you want to be able to see some demonstration of, say, the EBE or some of the techniques someone's interested in, rather than just me parroting all the features that you want to see, because we'll end up just eating up the clock, and I don't think anyone's going to thank us for that. F11, this is F11 and select water so it appears in the uppercase. This turns the water off. Yeah. If I go into Run, I'll show you this technique. This is how you can switch water off, and this is also one of the top 5 ideas on how you can actually make your game faster. If your game doesn't have any water in it, you can permanently switch water off in your game, and it speeds up your game. So if you look at this, you've got actually got no water right now. What I'm going to have to do is drill a hole. So I'm just going to F9 mode, increase the size of the brush, hold down shift, and then left click, and just keep going down until I hit water. Don't worry about the entity, it's currently on clever entity mode, which adjusts its own vertical position based on what happens with the terrain. So it keeps pace with the storm. You know what? I'm probably going to have quite a big hole when I've finished. But you can trust me that once you've got some water in your scene, if you press F11, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can press those numerics on your keyboard. So if I press water, actually, water was off. So can we see the water now? No, the hole's still not deep enough. So yeah, pressing 2 toggles where the water's on and off. And you can use that if you've got a slow frame rate. You can actually switch it off and see if you get an actually speed up. So what else have we got on the live talking bit? Tree batching is on the voting board. Good. OIC, not sure, top of my head. You can run a script which disables water if you want, so no issues in a standalone. Yes, that's how you would do it. You would actually have a start marker, which inside a zone, you would assign a script to the zone, and the script would say, switch off the water, and switch off anything else that might be slowing down your game if you're on a low-end system. And when you're getting near the end now, which is really good, you can't unless you turn water off. But if you raise a big area of ground and flatten it, then build on that, you can dig deeper. Yeah, I mean, you've seen here where I'll just get rid of this entity, come back out, get rid of these two, dink, dink. You see how this, I'll just grab it, how we can basically cover the hole. So you would think that if this terrain, this entity was the same texture as this ground, you would think there was a hole in the terrain. You see, so that's kind of how you would do it. So you wouldn't really need to create an artificial terrain high above the earth. You basically just do the sort of the recesses that you want, and then cleverly cover it with an entity that sort of matches the texture of the terrain. You want to know where the terrain texture lives? You just go to Files, Terrain Bank, whichever terrain you've selected. I think that one was lush, and then it's default ._d.dds, and then there's mossite and path and rock. So whichever one of the variations of texture on that terrain, you just take that, use it and create an entity, and then you can just line it up. And obviously make sure that your UVs match so it doesn't have a concentrated amount of UV texture data and then it stretches across this huge terrain. So you're going to have to have an entity which controls that UV data, so the UV mapping, the texel resolution is the same, so you don't actually notice any difference between the real terrain and then the sort of artificial terrain that you're sticking over the top. Nice little piece of advice there. And that's the end of all the live conversation questiony things. So now we can get on and show all the good stuff, which is the EBE. So I'm going to set a new level. Bum, ba, ba, da, bum. And we're going to go to Builder, Add New Site. So you've got a little marker which shows where your site's going to be. You click it down. I've got a little message now which, in case you've got a slower system, or certainly a slower CPU, that process of building the EBE's background resources might take a while. So now you've got a little message which tells you what's going on, so it doesn't look like the editor's freezing. You've got, as you may have saw before, a grid system. It now defaults to the floor piece, because when you drop it in, it's very big, it's visible, you can paint instantly. And it'll sort of, anyone who remembers FPS Creator Classic will remember this is pretty much where you started. You would have a grid and you would just start painting almost immediately with floor segments, and so you're getting sort of a reminder of that here. But it's just, it means, it comes back to that here, how do you make a building editor that's as easy as possible and as quick as possible? Well, it's this. You just drop in a site, so my construction area is here, and I'm now instantly going to start painting this wall. So if I zoom in, floor. So if I zoom in, and I think that's all I ever wanted to do, boom. You've just made a structure in less than 10 seconds that's now been collision optimized, polygon optimized, and it's already got its texture, and you're ready to rock. Which is great. But then, of course, you want a lot more than that. So what you can do This is new, because I remember that you wouldn't have seen this. If you you notice when I test game and I came back, you notice the grid's gone. That's now an entity. That's an entity like any other entity. I'll just drag in an entity to prove what an entity looks like. Let's take a box. That's an entity, and that's an entity. Which means when I click that, and I sort of extract, and then hold down shift, I can do 3 boxes. You would expect to be able to do the same with this. And I'm going to get back to that. But what you can actually do, no, I'll do it now actually. I've done 3 of those, and I'm now going to make 3 of these. So I'm going to do extract, hold down shift, and now I can create 2 copies of the building, because it's just an entity. See, what happens is, when you're in the EBE construction mode, it's as if you're doing like a little miniature, like you've got your little electronic 3D modeler helping you out in the background. But then once it's finished, and you come back, it's an entity. It's an entity that you can do things with. I mean, you can position it in all the axes, you can rotate it if you wanted to. And if you rotate it, then you might want to edit it later, which is the next thing. How do you edit what you've created? Normally, if you're a 3D modeler, you'd have to go all the way back to your tool and then load up the original file, then edit it, then re-export it, and make sure you've not messed up any of the settings or any textures and stuff like that. With this, you just click it like a widget, get your widget menu, you've got a new option. It replaces properties, because there isn't really any properties, it's really just geometry and texture. Buildings don't even need a script by themselves, because what does a brick do? Brick doesn't really have any logic. A door does, and you can attach a door to this eventually, but a brick wall doesn't really need a script. And if you wanted a brick wall you could destroy, then that would be dynamic, so that being an attached entity, and that would have a script, because you'd want to be able to detect when something hits it and then it would crumble down. So you would actually have a hole in your wall and then replace that with a wall that looks like a wall but actually is a dynamic, immobile wall that has a script that could play an animation, and the wall could be destroyed. So if I click edit, look what happened. Not only did it bring back my construction area, so my construction site is back and my grid is back, because I rotated the entity. You know, it's not going to try and realign it so this 90-degree thing. It's going to respect the fact that I rotated that entity, and now I can edit in its rotated state. So you can see I'm actually editing this. If I press E, E takes you back into entity mode, just as you would have done in terrain mode. If I go into terrain mode, and then I go to E, go back to entity mode, so I can move that entity. They're all entities, so I can move this around, that's an entity. But here's the cool thing. Now, when I extracted this and made a copy of that, it's like this crate. When I extracted a crate and made a copy of it, they're all this crate here in the master, the local collection of entities that I select from add new entity. They're all the same crate. There are no differences between them. So, with the same logic, those are the same building. They just happen to be 2 instances of them. So if I go into here, edit, and go to builder, and select wall, and we'll select, say, a different rock this time, rotate, and I paint this wall, rotate, and I paint another wall, and another wall, and then I leave a gap, go to door, pop a door in, maybe pop a window in. Maybe have a wooden roof, so we'll go to that piece, go up 1, paint a roof, like so. Back down again, scroll out. Lovely, isn't it, as the building. Now, because I've edited this, and remember this is just an instance, it transmits these changes back to the parent, then the parent says, oh, I now need to refresh all the instances. So when I press E, it's going to optimize the polygons, it's going to create the collision data, and it's also going to prepare the parent and then migrate across the instances. Now, I've not really tested this in a day, so let's see if it happens. So I press E. Instantaneously. That's how quick it was to do that whole polygon optimization thing. So now what you actually have is 2 instances of the parent building. Why is that important? Well, if you've made a mistake like, I wanted 2 windows here. If it was the old way, you'd have to go and edit this, add a window, go over here, edit this, add a window, and it'd be a bit of a nightmare. But what you could do is just say, well, let's bring this a bit closer and rotate it as well. So we'll bring it round to about here. Move it a bit closer. And what we can do is edit this one. Go to Window. Click a window in. Obviously a different texture, which is a nice little test. And we'll swing around to this. And then we press E. Watch what happens. See, it updated the parent and then all the instances reflected. Now all the instances are just regular entities. They all carry the EBE raw data in the parent, but then all the entities have is that optimized low poly version at the end of the day. So we added a window and it migrated to all its children. Now I know what you're thinking, because this was one of my dilemmas. Should I do this or have a per entity storage of the data? And the dilemma for me was, well, what if you didn't want that window added? What if I was quite happy with that building and now it's nagging changed? Well, that's really easy. All these have a name. I mean, right now there's only one. It's called site 00001. So you can only create one entity. But the idea is, if you go and click Add New Site again, you can create a new construction site. You can then go into the old construction site, copy the entire building using the Cut, Copy and Select tool, and then switch to the new construction site and paste it there. And then it's a unique building with a different site name. So you see how it works? If you want two different buildings, you can customize them separately. Just create site 1 and site 2, and then cut and paste backwards and forwards as you see fit. But generally, it's treated like you would expect an entity to behave. Because what's the point in learning how entities work and just got to grips with entities and then introduce an EBE that creates this new kind of entity that doesn't follow the rules of the entity? It also has other perks as well, like the light mapper light maps entities. Now these are regular entities, indistinguishable from a regular entity. They can be light mapped. Whereas before, you would have to have special case entities that would constantly reconstruct themselves from the EBE data, which would doubtless lead to a lot of bugs and horror stories. So now we've created two buildings and some crates. We'll press run. The theory is, because again you're watching a development version, so you're watching it live and unrehearsed. Get rid of this light rays, it's a bit much. Increase shadows, increase terrain and entities, increase my SAO, reduce that little bit, reduce ambient, increase the surface level. Why did I do all that? Well, for me, I get a slightly nicer impression when I do all them changes. I like a stronger shadow. You know, I like to reduce the effect of the direct light and the sunlight on the buildings, and I want a little as much SAO as I can get, and some nice dark shadows. So yeah, you can see how it's collidable, so I can slide along the walls. And of course I came in through the door. Same with this one, it's rotated different, but the collision works as well. And I can't go wireframe, I could do it in some tools, but I can't do it right now for you. But you'll notice that, whereas before, this wall for example, would be 20 cubes across by 20 cubes high, each cube is 12 polygons, that would be a very intense collection of polygons. Now that entire wall is 12 polygons. It's the same UV, you know, it's identical UV and texture mapping. It just doesn't need as many polygons because it maps across quite nicely. So that's what I mean by polygon optimization. And that whole building with its 3 different textures is one draw call. That building is one draw call. If you put small structures close enough together and light map them, the whole thing, several buildings, would be one draw call. So lots of optimization going on. So those are the exciting parts that I wanted to show. There's another thing that I'll reveal. If you're going to add new entity and go to a new folder that will be created for version 1.14 called EBE sites, you'll actually have a list of all the sites you've ever created. So if you think about it, if you made a building in one level, but you want to use it on level 2, 3 and 4, or you want to use it in a project a week from now or a month from now, you can. You actually have every building you've ever made here. And what's particularly special is it's live. So if I have actually got site 0001, which is this building here, and let's say I'm halfway across the map, I'm somewhere else, I'm editing sort of the lava pits of Drokos or something like that. And I don't want to scroll all the way back here to extract that building to bring it back over here. Well, you would just do it like an entity. You'd just add new entity, EBE sites, you'd select that particular building that I was really proud of. It would add it to your entities just as a regular entity, and then you're able to drop it in here. What you haven't seen yet is once I created a site in Builder, as soon as I switch back to entities, you would see that site there. It acts like any other entity. And then obviously that gives you all the benefits that I've just outlined. Whatever you can do with an entity, for the most part, you'll be able to do with EBE constructions. And of course you can imagine that leads on to that wonderful idea that you can create buildings, you can put them on the store as entities so that people can buy. But the cool thing about EBE buildings, and maybe it's a flag, we can switch this one on and off, is that you could sell them with the EBE block data intact. So people could take your building and then edit it. You can actually add more doors, more floors, more windows. You can extract little bits of what you got and then make your own entirely new buildings out of them. So you can imagine there's very few things you couldn't do with the versatility of having it as an entity. Here's another little idea. Let's say I grab this one like that, paste it down, press return, go up. I can create this two-story building, which is actually two entities. Now you wouldn't need to do that. The EBE could make a 10-story building if you wanted to. But it just goes to show that even if you've got someone who's made an EBE, but you want to make their building a 4-story one, and you don't have the EBE block data, don't matter. You just stack one on top of the other because they're just entities. Just like you would stack this crate. If I extract it, click it once, and then hold down Shift, every time I click, it's just going to add one more crate on top. Ta-da! On top of the building. Because they're just entities, just like anything else. So what's left? What's next? Well, obviously, like I said, I want to be able to do composites so you can attach doors and windows to the building. Of course, the doors and windows, I don't have an artist who's preparing all this stuff. So, that will be really up to you to create buildings, create a hole big enough, and then create some entities. Or get some artists to create some entities for you, and then you can click them into your building. You've got the texture menu, which still yet to be expanded. I mean, you've still got the ability to choose the different textures, all that kind of stuff. More textures are coming in all the time, so that's good. I'm going to create some really nice selections for you, not these reds and greens and oranges. You have to create all the kinds of textures you would expect. Different kinds of stone, different kind of floor and ceiling and walls. Maybe one or two different kinds of wood texture. Certainly all the textures, I'll be choosing them because they wrap around, so you wouldn't get things like that. It kind of gets away with it because it's floorboards, but really you don't want to see that there's a gap or a seam there. There's another thing, you notice there's little bits of white. I don't think you can see it on the low quality Twitch feed that I'm giving you. There's a little bit of white, you can actually see the individual tiles. That's because using a texture atlas and it's stealing texture colours from the neighbouring texture plate. It's called texture bleed. So one of the techniques I'll be implementing is that within each of the tiles of the texture there'll be a duplicated merging, so there'll be no texture bleed, and it might be merging several pixels thick. It would reduce it so you wouldn't be 1024 anymore for a single texture area. It'd be something like 1020 with 4 pixels of merging around the outside. That will defeat this. There's a few other jiggery pokery things, like you've got to change the UV data ever so slightly so it still perfectly wraps, but leave that with me. And if I have time, which I never have time, but if I have time I'll do a little tool which generates a big texture plate, which is this 4x4, each one being 1024 by 1024, so it does that seamless wrapping. You've already got a seamless texture, but you have to sort of squash it and create a margin and get the pixels just right. And it's not something anyone can do. It requires some crazy-ass understanding of UV data. So I can actually just write a tool that just assembles the texture plates, which actually introduces another really cool idea. Right now you'll be able to click a button and create your own texture plate. So you just select custom texture, but it's a texture that includes all 16 of these selections. Wouldn't it be great if you could actually replace individual textures in this grid? So you like my selection for the most part, but you want 3 of your own textures, but you want to keep the rest. Rather than needing clever skills to create a brand new texture sheet or the texture atlas, you could just replace 3 of those 16. So maybe that's something we add into this version, and we just delay the release a little bit. So let me know if that's something you're interested in. Just checking out the clock, about 10 minutes to go, so I'm going to go back to the conversation. It looks like it's run on quite a bit. So I just want to see if there's any more questions about what I've done, because there might be something I've missed or something that was glaringly not obvious that I need to elucidate on. Oh god, there's a lot of stuff. I guess it's just been going on and on and on, but we've got a lot of viewers this time. I don't usually get this many viewers. I guess the EBE is sort of getting a lot of interest, and subsequently I'm getting a lot of questions that I have to read through. Oh, yep. I guess I've done something good because there's a lot of interest here now. So we skip past that, some hellos and things. Right, we'll start here. Love the instancing functionality. I thought you'd like that. Works like an entity, so it's also familiar to, I think, everyone who uses Game Guru. But what if the instance to be different? Belios asks, what if it's different? As I said, you can just create a new site and then just copy the cube data into it. And it's a very quick process. You could do it in like 6 seconds, and then you've got another site and you can customize that to whatever you want. So yeah, if it's an identical building and you just want to add an extra door, then just do that, create a new site, drop it in, blah blah blah. You could be really smart about it and have a series of sites which is just your constructions, you know, little blocks of things, so you can keep going into it and just take pieces and then assemble a different site with bits of these pieces. And there might even be a possibility of taking those pieces and saving them as brush shapes, so then you can drag them in from the menu, so you don't even have to keep going back to some sort of repository site for all the things that you might want to be using to create something larger. Synchromesh says it's looking good. Synchromesh looks like I've answered this question already, so it's good. I can move on. A toggle to switch on and off would be ideal if you don't want the exact copy of the building, but that is so cool. Yeah, it could be. You could just, at a pinch, let's say we've done this building. Let's get rid of this because we're just confusing our issue. Get rid of that. Delete these cubes. Let's say this is currently an instance and you can edit. Maybe there's another option here which says new site or something. So it basically takes this, creates a new site, and then it creates a new parent for it. So then you can just edit it immediately without all this backwards and forwards between the two sites. That might be a pretty cool idea. Someone totally needs to remind me of that on the forums, so I can put it in my my little list. But yeah, good idea. Little toggle there. I think I'm being slow, but what is the yellow object to the left of the building? It's the marker. If you have a site with nothing on it, how would you select it? For example, here's my construction site. That's going to be the future place of sort of a hill fort or something. But you notice when I added the site, I didn't add anything on no floors, no walls, and then I came out of it. So, you know, how would I be able to select it? There'd be nothing to click. So these little yellow spiky things are the sort of the flags that you put in the ground to say this is that site, and if you come back out, this is that site, and so on and so forth. You could argue that if you drop in a site and don't edit anything, then it deletes the site, so it doesn't even exist. But I don't know, there might be situations where you've added a site and then you've thought, oh wait a minute, I just want to do something else, come out. Don't you want to be able to go back in? Rather than just go back to this menu and select add new site? It's debatable. And of course when you play the game, this little yellow spiky thing disappears. It's only for the purpose of the editor. Much like you have markers which disappear but are useful when you're editing the game. Scrolling down, BOTR, just the grid corner marker won't be seen in game. Okay, so that has been assumed. Being able to keep the building you make, yeah, that was answered earlier. Can the building be any height, for example, multi-story? I take it you weren't partaking of our last broadcast, but I will demonstrate for the uninitiated. We'll use our new site. Go to edit. We have a simple 4 panel room with a door. They get confused. We'll put a door in it, like so. No, they put a door in. Thank you. And then if you wanted a second story, you go page up. It's actually aligned to the grid. So if you was using a cube, you could paint individual cubes. I've put a new shape in now called block, which is a bigger cube. I've called it block because it's slightly bigger. Notice the shadows are now responding. So the shadows are being cast within the editor. That's a little help. Once you put your floor in, you can add another set of walls, like so. And maybe you want windows in this one. So we'll put 2 windows in here. And then maybe you want this one to be like a double height room. So just do page up again without adding the floor. And so that's a really high room, that one. And then you can go up again. And maybe you want a wooden floor. Maybe this is the executive, you know, the penthouse set of rooms. So not only that, we can add the walls. Maybe go back to that concrete material. And you can do this for 10 stories. So I'll just stop here. I'll just put a nice concrete weatherproof roof on. And then you can use mouse wheel to scroll back to the bottom. There's another feature that you may not have seen last time. You know the tab to actually cut off buildings? It now works with EBEs. And if you hold down Control and mouse wheel, you can change the fog of war. So if I wanted to just edit on the second story, I can go page up, and then as you can see, I've got a cube, and then page up. I can get it there exactly. So now you can actually paint within the room, but you're not being interfered with by, say, the roof that might be above it. So if I wanted to go down to the first floor, like so, you see how the roof is in my way, but maybe I want to stand back. So I can paint, say, here, like that, but if I just want to zoom back a bit with the S key, it's in my way. So I hold down Control and mouse wheel. Essentially what I've probably gone the wrong way. I can actually get rid of the ceiling, you see. So I just scroll until it's totally clipped. And now I can still have my distance, and then I can paint what I want. Looks like the grid is also being clipped unnecessarily. So we'll have to do a little tweak in there. But that's another feature, the fact that you've now got this this fog of war. And yeah, you can see what's happening. Even though we're clipping it with the alpha, it's not clipping it on the Z buffer. And because the Z buffer is writing into this foreground object, it's basically not allowing the grid to render. So we'd have to switch off Z writing when you actually do the clip. But that is a 5-minute job. And where we had any more time on the broadcast, I could probably fix it live for you. But I just want to show that that's now possible. And also to show that that's how you make a 3-story building in the time it takes for me to talk about it. Just going to go back to the live because we are running out of minutes. But I did start 2 minutes late, so I'm going to give you a bit more time. There you go. Big building. And as you saw, if you want to see more, look at the last Twitch broadcast where I created a staircase. And you can create a staircase, you can go up to the first floor, which is the second floor, third floor, and then go up 10 stories. And remember before we stacked those 2 buildings together, if you want a 20-story building, just stack the same building on top of it. Have a 50-story building if you want. Maybe that's a competition, who can make the tallest building. So what else have we got on the chat? Synchromesh says better than the reloaded version I saw a while back. Yeah, that was the well, we did many iterations actually of various features over there, but I'm pretty happy in thinking we've taken all the things that people want and I've tried to condense it into something that would make it very easy to use and very fast to use, and this is what we've got so far. But it is just a first draft. It has to go through beta yet and get people's opinion on it. I'm hoping to release that soonish. This is what we need to create our own structures. Great work, Lee. Thanks very much. I'm not sure if you could go more than 2 floors. Yep, you can go up to 10 floors. So it looks like some people are helping answer the questions. Milo 9000, so eventually I could put a building you made the EBE in the store with the EBE data for one piece and maybe just the building alone for a reduced price. Yes, I think that's a clever idea. I don't think you can do it right now because these EBEs require an extra file, a .ebe file accompanying with the FPE file. And I don't think the store would allow that. But yeah, I think we could probably expand in that direction. There'll be a lot of creativity, I think, demonstrated with the EBE, allowing people that couldn't model before to get a hand in and be able to create structures and put it on the store and get interest from other people. Any release date for the beta of the EBE? Nope, no release date. As you see, I really want to get a nice version that doesn't go unstable and lets you create lots of things and give you the options that I have been talking about before I unleash it on you. There's no point giving you loads of stuff and then you go with feedback, because it's probably feedback that I know about myself, and I will add before I kind of give you something that will properly work, i.e. you can create something and then save your level and then reload that, and you've got all the stuff that you've made intact. It would be unfair otherwise. But please don't create anything in the beta thinking you can use it in the final version. If I change the format, everything you've made is useless. So just a little footnote there for you. Ding ding ding. Floor sound was the same as the grass. Yeah, that's because I've not added the material index to the building. Now, the material index are responded on a per mesh basis. Now, if you wanted a different material for the floor and different material for the wall, in terms of the collision sound, you would need 2 meshes, and that means 2 draw calls. Now, that's a serious question I have to ask. Are you prepared to give an extra draw call so you can actually have a different material sounds as you walk on them and as you shoot them? So that's going to be an interesting question. The answer, of course, is that we have a generic footfall sound effect that just kind of works whether it's metal, wood, solid, stone, soft material, carpets, whatever it is. Maybe just change the, have some trigger zone which can change that sort of sound effect. So if you've got a piece of carpet, just create a little trigger zone on the carpet, and as you walk over it, it changes your footfall. That might be a way in which you can keep your one draw call and then have your sound effect. But there we launch into the realms of optimizing games. You wonder why something you buy off the shelf is massively optimized because of hacks like that. For those horribly boring things I don't inflict on you, but has to be done if you want a top-end AAA game running on the lowest possible system at the highest possible speed. It's often hidden from people in the Game Guru community because it's just so horribly boring and so time-consuming. You wouldn't want to make a game at the end of doing all those lessons. Scrolling down, I want to the last page, which is good. How big can we make these buildings? Is there a way to expand the building grid size? They're fixed at 10 by 10 by 10. So if I show you a new site, you see that grid? That's a 10 by 10 by 10. It's a fixed grid. That doesn't mean you have to make a building that big. You can make a building which is basically tiny. You could just create a cube. You can make a building that big if you wanted to. Little outhouse or something. And it just so happens that when it turns into an entity, that's what it is. It's just that big. If you want to make something bigger than that, the reason I'm not making it you can have a grid size any size is I want to keep you in one place. I want all your tools to be in front of you and the thing you're working on in front of you. I don't want you scrolling 50 miles that way and 50 miles that way. It requires more keys, more control. Where's this? Can I have a search function to get to different markers within the construction area? Why not just create this massive building, leave a door at one end, and then create another massive building and then link them together? You know, a bit more manageable. But if people are constantly creating these massive buildings and then wanting bigger construction areas, then I'll expand the size. The reason it's this size is that it keeps the memory footprint very small, the work on optimizing the collision and the polygons very quick, and it means you can fluidly go through creating your structures. If there was some massive area, then I'd have to kind of scan all that, even if you'd started constructing it at the very far end. So, you know, you've done a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm going to have to box check the whole thing. So that's why I've actually imposed this size. If you think it's not big enough, do let me know. So just scrolling down to the next one. Can you change them in the FPE, but do EBE objects have EBEs? The EBEs are FPEs. The only difference between an EBE and an FPE is that the EBE has some block data. See these blocks? Ding, 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 ding. A regular entity doesn't have this information, doesn't have the ability to remember this stuff. As soon as you come out, it's now an entity. You know how instantaneous that was? So that's now an entity. You just created your own geometry with your own UVs and your own textures. That's how cool it is. But and you could sell that as an entity, because it's I'm going to be able to save out that object. It's not saving at the moment. That's why you can only have one site. But you're able to the next time you go into, like I said, add new entity EBE sites. This would be a thumbnail. It'd be an FPE. It would also be a .x. It would be a .dds, and it would be a .ebe. Now you wouldn't see the .ebe in a regular entity, but in every other respect, it is just an entity, and you can actually go off and sell that with or without the .ebe file. But the .ebe file allows you to highlight and click edit, because then you can get back and say remove that floor. You won't be able to remove it if it was its highly optimized polygon version. I mean, it'll be a nightmare, absolute nightmare. That's why the EBE data is important. But that's the only real difference between FPE and an FPE that carries the EBE status. Belly said a good point. Not sure about the FPE, but if it's an entity like the other, then it would have thought so. Yeah, just answering the question I've just already answered. So Turka says it's awesome and fantastic. Thanks very much. Game Guru versus Minecraft. Lol. Well, I must admit I have taken inspiration from how popular the non-professional game creation community is in that Minecraft world. Minecraft users seem to come out the stable running. They'll be able to create buildings and caves and all kinds of things just with a simple block. 15 million users can't be wrong. So I don't think I'm actually doing any harm whatsoever by being a little bit inspired by Minecraft. Just making them a little smaller and creating more than the cube shape, and I think we'll be there. I think we'll have a really great little tool. I've just looked at the clock. I've totally exceeded. That's the first time ever in broadcasting history I've gone over that hour mark. So if anyone only allocated themselves an hour, or they've just been found out by their boss, I massively apologise. But I think I'm going to wrap it up now. I've just got one more question here at the bottom. If I build a 2-story building, can I punch a hole to add stairs, for example, afterwards? Yeah, of course you can. Just as you saw here, I created a 2-story building because this second room's big. And let's say it's like, oh no, how am I going to make staircase now? There's no hole in the floor. Oh dear me. What you can do, you can go into entity mode, select, edit. Oh, have I reached one of my little crashes? Probably. You see, that's probably a really good idea why I finished the broadcast after 60 minutes. Because at 61 minutes, Game Guru does horrible things. But for those joining us relatively new for the first time, this is my internal developer version. I'm still writing it, so please don't see this as a reflection on Game Guru. It is a reflection on an internal development version that people never see. What they see is the finished result, which has been thoroughly tested by the beta testers. So I'm afraid you're not going to see that. But the answer is yes. You can create a 2-story building and then go back and then punch a hole in the floor and then create some stairs. So hopefully that concludes this broadcast. As per usual, if you want me to talk about anything else other than the EBE, then post it here. I do apologise that we used up all the time on the EBE, and so we have no time left to talk about the animations of characters and the state engine and transition in between them, or the golden rules on how to make your Game Guru faster. But what I will ask to really help me along, you send me a custom model with custom animations with a list of the start and end frames for that model, and we'll go the whole hog. I'll actually show you how to have someone who's sitting down, who can get up, run a little bit and wave, because that's originally what you wanted. But you need to give me the model and the keyframes, so then I can actually show you what to do in the script half. So until next week, it could be Wednesday, it could be Thursday, I'm not telling you. But until next week, I hope you enjoyed this Twitch broadcast. I'm now going to put it on YouTube for everybody else to enjoy. So until next week, I shall say goodbye and adieu.